Yes, it's Finnish Football Show. Hi, I'm Mark Wiltshire from Explore Finland, as ever joined by Mark from FC Suomi. Hi, Mark.
Hello. Hello.
And Rich from Escape to Suomi. And Rich, we heard you perfectly before I pressed record, and now we're recording. I can't hear you.
I saw you say hello, yeah, but there it is.
Are you there, Rich?
I can't really hear you very clearly, but hey.
Can you not? Okay, we got some kind of connection anyway.
Hello.
And it's been a little while again since we last recorded, and that's why I stumbled over the name of Mark's website. But I do know that it's FC Suomi. Sorry, Mark.
No problem.
Rich, what shirt are you wearing today? It's bright.
Poll a couple of weeks ago. It was. I'm really down to the bare bones of mine. This was the Ilves 1990 Suomen Cup in actually. So. May still smell of champagne, but yeah, this was the outright winner this time. So yeah, and it's I burst into flames as we know why.
It's got a nice Oompa Loompa look about it.
Yeah, it's let's see if we can stand up for the camera, but yeah, it's 200% polyester.
And that's a real piece of work with the design as well. I don't know what was in the water back in the 1990s.
Tamper for you.
This episode, as ever, is going out live on YouTube. I can see myself on there, which is a joy. That means that's working, and there's live chat. So anyone that joins us live can make comments, and I'll keep an eye on the live chat there. This is Finnish Football Show 17. We have some catching up to do, and what we're going to do today is record perhaps a couple of episodes. So the episode you're going to listen to now will be us doing a bit of catch up on things that have happened recently, and then a forthcoming episode will be looking forward to the 2018 season, and we'll try and get that out before Christmas. That'll be our Merry Christmas episode, and I'll probably put some sleigh bells over the top of that somewhere as well, just to make it seasonal. As I said, we want input from our listeners, so the live viewers can use the message box there on the YouTube page. Podcast listeners use social media to get in touch with us after the show with any feedback. Our handles are @FC Suomi, @Escape to Suomi, or @Explore Finland. And maybe you want to join the Finnish Football Show Facebook group. Obviously on Facebook, search Finnish Football Show, and you'll find us. Ask us to join, and we'll let you in there. So before we get started, Rich, as ever, no noisy biscuits, no F-bombs. Away we go.
Dream of it.
You would dream of it, and you haven't got your abusive cup this week.
No, I've just got a Finland Paloliitto Cup.
Quite right as well. Quite right. How about if we start with Veikkausliiga? And the last time we talked, I think there were a couple of games left in the Veikkausliiga. There was pretty much I think Huuhkajat had been crowned champions, or were just about to be crowned champions. There was nothing particularly new there with regards to who was going to win it. But Rich, maybe tell everyone what happened with the European qualification places over those last couple of weeks.
Well, Huuhkajat ended up winning by 20 points, which is I didn't quite look into it, but that's by far the biggest total in quite some time. The last couple of years, we actually went down to the final day before the champion was crowned. It was Kups and Ilves came second and third, respectively, which I think for both sides was certainly a positive on their season. Ilves in particular they did well the year before. They both finished on 56 points, which
formed the heart of a long distance Kups fan like yourself, Rich.
It has, yeah, because Kups had sort of 3 or 4 years of absolute mediocrity, not threatening either end of the table. Coaching Jani Honkavara, who'd been at Hifki, they had a very different look at the way the team was run. So they brought in some more experienced players, Saucer, Saxman, and they've had generally a good run of youths coming into the side as well. Urho Nisila, who I saw in the flesh 2 seasons ago, he was out very, very good for them this season, scored plenty of goals, broke into the Finland under 21 side. And yeah, that was good news for them. Because Hawick also won the Swarman Cup, the Europa League place for that came down to 4th in the table, and it was Malleham's to lose on the final day. They lost, and Latti scored a last-minute goal against Hifki, and leapfrogged them into 4th, and they were very, very happy with that. It's as an Arsenal fan, I'm well aware of teams really happy about finishing 4th, and yeah, they were happy, and to be honest, they picked up in the second half of the season, and looking good for next year. And then Maraham dropped down to 5th, so a bit of a sort of after the Lord Mayor's show after last year's title, and Asiko was 6th after very much what we'll call it a season of transition for them.
Well, I got into a low heat debate on Facebook for daring to say that we'd had a couple of underwhelming seasons, which for the comments that were made back were, well, in 2016 we moved to a new stadium and we won the cup, which is true, but my response was that just raised the bar so much higher, and so coming third, yeah, winning the cup, okay, yes, that's an achievement. And then this season, where it seemed like from winning the league to not winning the league to not qualifying for Europe, I think underwhelming. I stand by my scathing criticism. Yeah, I don't know. I think that we had a nice win, and the final game of the season completely dead rubber. Really, nothing was really going to change. A 5-0 win against Inter. Lots of goals, some really nice football, and some optimism just to raise those expectations again for next year, I think.
Sorry.
And I was going to say, and your new manager's now confirmed, right?
Yes.
So,
yeah, in place with a coaching team as well.
So there's something to build on for the future. But I mean, I think you can't be. I think nobody can take issue with you for a 6th place finish. And what was fundamentally a procession in the cup final against Huuhkajat. It was, I mean, the SJK's kind of performance in the cup final was more of an indictment on the cup structure than it was on like Huuhkajat's brilliance or like quality. Because for SJK to get to the final, it was, let's face it, a relatively easy path, and then 6 months off, during which time the whole kind of infrastructure of the club collapsed twice and was rebuilt twice. so yeah, it's whoever is taking issue with you on Facebook, let me know.
No, I don't want to. I don't want to rile people up anymore. I hate arguing on social media anyway. I know some people think it's great sport, but it just sucks the soul out of me. So it was low heat. Exchange of different opinions between some friends, and I'd like them to stay friends. So I'm going to send the Finnish football show mob round onto this. And I guess we'll park it there for kind of Asjiko, and we'll probably come back to them a little bit when we talk about some transfers and things later on in the show. What about at the bottom of the table?
I mean, we all, between us and the prediction post that we had at the start of the season, it was all very much a sort of three-way bun fight between Kemi, Hifki and Yiikko. Yiikko were relegated, but they, let's be honest, after a dreadful start, they actually made a good fist of it in the end. They had a good run of results of July, August time, and their relegation wasn't confirmed until sort of 2 weeks before the end of the season, which at one point was looking, forlorn. Hifki did sort of put up a bit of a spirited fight, but mostly because Kemi just dropped like a stone. They really hit a bad run of form, and as even on the last day, at one point, Hifki were a goal away from staying up.
That's
Kemi.
That last minute Lahti goal, if it had gone the other way, they had, I think, 3 goals on them, three goals difference ahead of them, something like that.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is that Hifki have beaten Lahti, they've stayed up. Kemi had to only get a point at home to Kups, And admittedly, Krups had a silver medal to play for, but they really just gave up. The second half of the season was pretty much a free fall for them. Amazingly, but I mean, they've stayed up, but they are looking like the team who will be struggling next season, were a doubt.
Those three predicted strugglers were the three bottom places, weren't they? And what you said is true.
Yeah,
seemed to be on 12 points for a long time, and then they finished, on 26 in 12th place, with Huuhkajat in 11th on 29 points, and Kemi in 10th place on 32 points. So it was pretty tight down there.
Yeah, and to say that was one of the more tense ends to the season down there. Anyway, Veikkausliiga did put up a good fight, and this time their relegation isn't under a financial cloud as such as it was last time. They've already secured most of their squad on sort of new contracts for next season. So going down to Huuhkajat, they should be certainly in contention for, if not promotion, then a playoff place. But yeah, it was a shame to see them go down at the first fall. But there's a lot wrong at Huuhkajat that I think their relegation is kind of indicative of. There's a lot of financial issues where they've had to issue their shares again after the playoff defeat. And it's an odd club. They're very secretive. They're the opposite of Huuhkajat, who are sort of very as open as they themselves to be. It's all a bit of a show, but they're very open about what they do. Certainly the good news. But Huuhkajat, while they don't have a big amount of good news to share, they're very, very secretive.
Yeah, and if you look on the pitch for Huuhkajat, they've got a lot of fight, a lot of tenacity, a lot of players who want to get into the physicality of the game, but they've also got a massive amount of there's no nice way to say this, old guys. You know what I mean? Like they've got a really aged squad, and in some key positions they've got really slow players. So it's a bit, yeah, I don't know. I mean, they in a way they had no justification to go down, because the backside fell out of PS Kemi for the last 2 or 3 months. They had 2 or 3 occasions, in particular the last day, where they could have, and then the preceding playoffs that followed, to get themselves out of the situation, and they just couldn't muster a coherent attack. You know what I mean? They couldn't really build a game.
And I think at one point they had because by all accounts they sort of blew their budget on signing Mikael Forsell, and he did okay for them. I think any half decent striker would have scored the goals that he scored. But I think at one point their starting forward line of 3 was Forsell, Sivel, and Valonen, with a combined age of 99 for the 3 players, which I can't talk. They're still younger than me, but it's it's still, if you're looking at a club who certainly had ambitions of staying in the division.
It's a bit rich for the Finnish football show to three-man strike force to be complaining when ours is probably over 120 combined age.
I mean, also, if you look at that the attacking options, it was Sivola, Forsell, and then Juha Mäkelä. And that's 3. There was those 3 players, similar to the Finnish football show, in not just being old and inflexible, or very similar guys. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? They're similar. They're exactly the same kind of player. So they just didn't have really the kind of, versatility or pace, I suppose, at the end.
Is it fair to say they maybe moved a little bit more than we do when we're presenting the show?
Some of them, maybe.
Yes. Yeah, I'll give that to Sivola, maybe.
Don't give him too much credit.
What happened in the relegation playoff then, Rich?
Well, the first leg ended. It was Huuhkajat against Huuhkajat. Huuhkajat ended up going into the playoff. Admittedly, the final day, but that was a bit of a tense title fight. They played Huuhkajat in the first leg at Huuhkajat, ended 0-0. Huuhkajat, bear in mind, they were the team with momentum. They'd come second in their division. They'd won, I think, 6 or 7 games on the bounce before their final day draw. And they'd beaten Huuhkajat in the cup at the start of the year as well. they, I suppose it's the issue of the playoff. It's tense. The stakes are high, but they didn't really show an awful lot. And over the course of the 180 minutes of the second leg as well, they went through on away goals in the end. The second leg ended 1-1, and again there was the usual sort of uproar. Oh, why is this all decided on away goals? But well, they knew the rules at the start. It's not a big issue. But they were winning for quite a while of the second leg, and then Huuhkajat did equalise. They caused some issues by throwing various items and flares and so on onto the pitch, and actually scorched the turf at Huuhkajat, which they weren't happy about. But yeah, there was some sort of, I wouldn't say problems at the final whistle, but there was certainly emotions were high, and it was a lot of standing off between the gobshites and the players, and ultimately they were disappointed to be relegated, and fair enough. But yeah, some of the headlines about hooligans this now, again, it was blown out of all proportion. It was nonsense. I think one of the projectiles was fired from a gun, which the old sort of baton round sort of thing. But having seen a video of it, and with my work hat on, the bloke probably deserved it, to be honest. But it was a bit of a squib in the end of a tie. But I'll be honest, I think Veikkausliiga on the pitch will benefit more next year from Huuhkajat being there.
Yeah.
Off the pitch, Huuhkajat have had their own issues and have come back seemingly very strongly. But on the pitch next year, they should provide a bit more entertainment, if nothing else, than Huuhkajat did.
Brings a couple of kind of bigger named clubs, I guess, back to Veikkausliiga as well after some time away.
Yeah, I mean, TPS have been down for, I think, 4 years. In that time, they've had big financial problems, but they've kept, very strong core of their squad. They're one of the sort of historically massive clubs in Finland, and a lot of players have either been there for a long time or have come back after spells away. And they've, over this year, and they really did deserve to win that division. The fact that it went down to the last day, and there was some integrity issues about the penultimate round of games when Huuhkajat beat Ops 10-0 away, which enabled them to go ahead of TPS on goal difference, which would have caused some issues had they won that final day. But yeah, in the end, TPS did well. That's sort of squad of players, and it's difficult to see how they'll do next year before the round of transfers go through. They're already looking at potentially losing Onni Valakari, who was certainly their best young player of the second half of the season after his Palolito enforced absence. He's, I believe he's having it. There were some issues about his transfer from Asikor when obviously when his dad left, Simo left Asikor, there was some, didn't hang around too long, but because he'd played for Asikor, I can't remember if it was the first team or the academy side, after the transfer window had closed, they basically said that he couldn't move as a free agent to TPS because he'd already played in that period, so he couldn't just get himself released from the contract and then sign for a new side. So he couldn't then play for TPS until the transfer window reopened in August. He wasn't allowed to play. Okay,
so no football until August, and then started playing for TPS.
Yeah, I mean, he came back in that last 3 months. He was electric. He got a hat trick, I think, 2 weeks before the end of the season. He's now certainly training with, I don't know if it's a trial, with his dad's new club in Norway. So, whether that turns into anything, I don't know. Maybe I
saw him in some of the indoor games. I'm not sure now if they're probably Salmon Cup games when it was the group stages, and he looked exciting, and I think scored a couple of goals, and I was really looking forward to seeing him push himself into the first team this season before that all fell through. And there was even talk of preparing a song for him to the tune of Kylie Minogue's "I Should Be So Lucky," which when scan the syllables in his name, Oni Valakari, Valakari. It kind of worked quite nicely. Whether he would have even known the song.
Oh, Kylie, my first love.
Billy Iron's song, Ashucore, is the only song I've ever kind of introduced to the crowd, is to the tune of Any Old Iron, which pleases the Brits there. The rest of them haven't. The rest of the Finns don't really know the tune. And I spoke to Billy about a year ago and said, "Oh, your song, and do you know the song?" And him and Richie Dorman just looked at me like I was some 80-year-old man talking about Vera Lynn songs. But it makes me smile every time we sing it anyway. So Billy, that one's for you. You can find Any Old Iron on YouTube somewhere, I'm sure. And the other thing about Ukkonen, I was quite hoping. I think in the Suomen Cup, KPV from Kokkola were doing very well and progressed quite nicely for Ukkonen's side into the later stages of Suomen Cup, and I was hoping that them and Jaro might make a push towards promotion just for the sake of having a few more local games to get to. It's always nice to have sort of less than 2 hours to drive to an away game and to try and squeeze in a couple of away games, which I think I failed miserably this year. So come on, boys, next year, KPV and Jaro 1 and 2. I don't care which way, but let's just have a bit more. There's always this kind of excitement about the Pohjanmaa mini league and who's the Pohjanmaa Mestari each season, which it kind of seems like 3 bald men fighting over a comb, but it's worth getting excited about anyway. And if we could have 4 bald men fighting for that comb, that would make it even more exciting.
Can I just drop in VPS for going back to Veikkausliiga? They, at one point of the season, I think were within a couple of points of Huuhkajat coming into June, July. They did, by Finnish club standards, quite well in the Europa League. They only got knocked out by Brøndby I think it was on away goals, and they beat them in the second leg. After that defeat, which I think was the first week of July, they didn't win again in the Veikkausliiga until it was the penultimate game of the season. I think it was 15 games they went without a win, which for a team that was second was something, because they ended up finishing 8th and only had about 6 more points than they had at that stage. So dropping like a stone. We talked about Kemi's sort of later half of the season, but VPS, after a brilliant start, absolutely just balls it up. It was
a crying shame.
Well, I'm sure you're devastated, but again, sort of seeing how, and whether it was linked to the Europa League defeat or not, I don't know, but it just seemed like after that, they beat Brøndby but lost on aggregate. It was massive drop off in form.
That was Seba Strandvald's goal, was it? Was that the one? The long distance, he hit like a 30-yarder. Yeah, I think it was a free kick or something like that. Yeah, it was. Yeah. That's a bit of it was a. They're worth pointing out. I think also as well. I'm never going to go a show without bringing them up. So Inter were 7th when Shefki got Das Boot, and they finished, I think, 8th. I think they only finished on something like, they were only something like 6 points ahead of Kemi by the end of it. So for anybody who said that that was targeting Shefki, and I know it's still Shefki's players and Shefki's club and the rest of it that he'd started with, but it's not like that changing the manager for Inter with, I think they had still 3 months to go in the season, had any impact at all in the West Coast.
They just promoted the system, didn't they?
Yeah. So it's, I don't know, yeah.
Well, I think it's been proven at Asukor that changing your manager, however many times you want to change it, isn't the way to build for long-term success. So what about moving on to looking at some transfers? Already there's been a little bit of transfer activity, and I think Rich, you mentioned the picking over of the Ilves team that's gone on so far. They've lost sort of 3 of their most important players. Ayana and Tendeng
have gone to Asiko. Iona was, I think, he's one of the top players in the division last season on the collection of the Ilta Sanomat Stars. Tendeng was their top scorer the season before, and Tukko, formerly of most of the clubs in Finland, he's already gone to Hoiko, and he scored 15 goals last season. He's been at Lahti, he's been at Asiko as well. I think he first came into Finland via Jippo, and so he's now gone to Hoiko, and presumably will be their sort of key centre forward. And already that's sort of Ilves have come third and are being stripped for parts. And it's, the Hoiko certainly coming in for the centre forward, and the other two who, yes, they're at the end of their contract, and I'm sure Asiko probably can offer more remuneration and conditions and so on, and ultimately they're professionals. But within, I think, 3 or 4 days of the season ending, they'd already left and said they were going.
Well, they had quite a few going in the other direction a year or so ago. So, it's just payback time, I guess.
And say that's the thing. So Hoiko, because they've lost Atom Tanaka, he's gone back to Japan. He was certainly a very, very good player when fit, but that was his main issue. But he certainly boosted their profile abroad. Say no more. And Asikov also signed the wonderfully mulleted Anders Bath from. I can't even pronounce the name of the Swedish club.
Anders Borg.
But he's coming from Sweden, and I'll say again, Asikov starting already, rebuilding the side again.
Do we know where Nick?
Hopefully with Carlton in place, he's identified where there are weaknesses and gone from there to sort of try and fill those gaps. I know that there's also been new contracts offered to Richie Dorman and Radko Hurme and Jesse Sarajärvi, actually, who is worth talking about at some stage today, as well as Mate Radeski, who just come back from his long injury. And did it again, and has the best wishes of everyone on the terrace and in the club, I know, and has been offered a year's contract to kind of get fit and get back playing again. That will be like a new signing when he finally gets back on the pitch. Tough break.
Do we know where Nikolai Alho is going to end up?
No, I've not heard anything. He left Halmstad, and I didn't really follow him too much. I mean, it sounds horrible, but it's almost like his first port of call now will be return to Finland and almost start again.
I think he'll only have options in the Veikkausliiga. To be fair, Halmstad were a relegation fighter in the Swedish league, and he didn't do that bad, but he didn't pick up any real notoriety. I think he scored once or twice in something like 20 games, and I think he only finished 90 minutes something like 4 or 5 times. Yeah. So he didn't he didn't set the world alight. But what I was thinking was, I was quite surprised because it was about the same sort of time when Tukko was announced to go over to Hoiko, and I was thinking, well, the obvious thing for Alho is that he'd go back to Hoiko, but Tukko is basically the same kind of player, maybe with a bit more output in terms of goals and assists. So he'll be on some Veikkausliiga team's sheet next season, I'd imagine. But
anyone else moved anywhere so far that's of news? Well, it's there have been some moves. Mikko Kuningas, with the finest name, and obviously at Lahti he's gone to Inter. Kups have signed Karjalainen from Kemi. Mariehammer signed to Tamirovic from Rops, but they've lost a few players as well. Albin Granlund has gone to Örebro, Sweden. Yes. So he's broken into the Finland team and got his big move abroad. Anthony Daffer's left as well. Veli Lempi's retired at BPS. It's there've been some changes, but say we're waiting for, I suppose, the big round ahead of the Suomen Cup when the sort of open trials basically begin. There've been the various rumours and so on, and we shall see. But yeah, it's still early days. I suppose only 3 weeks since the season's finished.
Yeah, and so outside of Finland, I think Sergei Yarmolenko, there's talk of him leaving Basel and going to Russia, which I think would be. It could potentially be disastrous. I mean, the tricky part is that at Basel he's going to be part of one of those kind of European youth development academy things, which means he's got to keep his head down and his nose clean, and he's got to work hard for about 2 years and then maybe get a sniff at a bench in a European competition, or he could go and get actual combative games in somewhere like Russia. But how he's going to develop in terms of his technicality and his sort of skills is debatable about whether or not that'll happen.
We're talking about the youngest member of the Eremenko dynasty here.
Well, he's also talked about potentially moving country teams to Russia as well. There's an interview with his dad in the paper on Friday, where he gave a bit of an update on the brood. Alexei Jr. has this time properly retired from football again, and is now living in Russia and scouting African players to bring into Europe. So Sergei, yeah, he's been linked to Spartak Moscow, but there's talk that as an international side, I think he's somewhat disillusioned, and something we'll come on to later about the performances at youth international level of Finland, and is potentially looking at switching to Russia. And Roman, his drug ban has 11 months to go.
Yeah.
And yeah, we'll be looking at coming back, and hasn't ruled out playing for Finland again, which again we've spoken of. If it'll be a long way to go, but yeah, I think, did he actually leave CSKA in the end? His contract expired.
Yeah,
I think he's a free agent then, isn't he?
Yeah, they didn't offer him a new one, and I mean, I don't know what the the kind of the specifics of it are, but yeah, he's not under contract anymore.
Yeah, so in 10, 11 months' time, he'll be ready to start again. But even during his drug ban, he wasn't allowed to run the Berlin Marathon with his mum.
Yeah,
effectively, he's a professional sportsman under a wider ban. So, poor lad.
Yep, there it goes.
That probably brings us on quite nicely, talking about players being available for the national team, to move on to the third and maybe final section of this episode, which is the recent Huuhkajat results, the Finnish national team. Mark, your headline on FC Suomi said the Rivelution rolls on. Talking about Markku Kanerva since he took over, explain to people the nicknames. I think maybe in the next episode we should talk about nicknames for Finnish players and where some of these things come from, because I often hear you two referring to players by their nickname, and I'm like, okay, which one's that? How does that work? So we'll pick that one up a little bit later. But where does Rive come from as a nickname for someone called Markku Kanerva?
I think it was.
What I thought.
So yeah, so I don't know exactly, but he was a centre back by trade, and like when he was a pro player, and I think Rive is an indication to the guy who holds the line, the back line, the back four line. So Rivesa is Rive, and he was the guy who ran the line, and I think that's it. But I don't know. Finns often give weird nicknames for people. It was probably because there was another like Markku Kokkola or something in his team, so they couldn't call him Mako or Maka. So I haven't got the specifics on on the etymology of his nickname, but anyway, he's done what he did as a player, which is put everything kind of back into order at Camp Huuhkajat, because it's 5 games now unbeaten. Which, if you think about the dark depths of sort of 2016 and the end of the Mixu era and all the rest of it, I think we couldn't envisage a time when we would have put ourselves up against Croatia and Turkey and come out with anything on the other side. You know what I mean? So
and they were really good performances, not just defending. I mean, it's in the like if I remember correctly, in 2016, in was it 9 or 11 games that we scored twice?
Yeah,
and then in the last, we've scored in every one of the last 7 games.
Yep. Then we scored. I think it was 3. The 3 we've scored 3 for the first time since the Faroe Islands, and we've won by 3 for the first time since like 2014.
I think it was the biggest home win in 7 years.
sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, it was Moldova at home. That was.
And maybe rather than going through each game bit by bit, what about what kind of trends have you noticed? Whether it's to do with the play or like you say, the organisation, or maybe players that have started to come through? Because there have been some changes.
Burusauri is like, we finally have a player with pace who doesn't like. He's just really straightforward. He's a very direct player that's really straightforward. He doesn't think twice. He doesn't really look up and try to pick the perfect pass. He puts his head down. He gets down the wing. He then either cuts inside, beats his guy, or he whips in across, and that's it. And it's like, it's the thing we've been missing for forever. Well, since probably, God, I want to go back to Jonas Golka, which is like, that's almost a decade ago. Just a guy who can get his head down and beat most defenders for pace, and he's not without a skill or a trick in his bag.
I think at international level, that's a big thing, isn't it? You don't have the time to work on sort of intricate passing routines and stuff. And you look at his goal against Estonia last week. You know, he got the ball out wide and just had that confidence.
Yep.
But you know, there was no sort of looking for the short 1-2. You know, and sometimes you need that little bit of that moment to just have the decisiveness and the confidence to go for goal. In 4 games, he's got 2 goals and 2 assists. His cameo against Croatia earns him essentially the freedom of Iceland.
Yeah,
that was the goal that essentially qualified them for the World Cup. You know, he dropped off the radar a little bit in certain people's eyes because he transferred to Belarus. But you know, we saw when he was at VPS last year, you know, what a potential talent he is, and you know, perhaps it's got him out of the spotlight. He's gone somewhere where there's not so much pressure on him, and he can develop. And he's getting games.
Yeah, and so I mean, so last year, at the end of last season, I think we had a Twitter, Facebook. What was it? What is it that you said, Mark? A low heated discussion with I think it was Yipe, who I think he said something along the lines of he really likes players that, you know, that maybe aren't so popular or go unnoticed or don't hit the stats, but that like really work well in the game. And my sort of response was I like guys like Burusauri who just put the ball in the net or put the ball in the box, because end product is like literally what it's all about. And it was, the back and forth was around, well, all his goals are tap ins or scruffy or ugly, and it's like exactly what you said. Like with the goal against Estonia, he goes down the flank, cuts back inside, beats his man, looks up. There's no option on in the box because everybody's sort of hiding behind a defender. So he just whips a shot in for the far post and gives it a crack. And that's like just decision and action. And I mean, that's the thing that when you watch Finland. When you watch Finland over and over again, one of the things that's the most frustrating is you get into a decent position on the edge of the final third, and then you have a moment of hesitation that lets your opponent literally just block off any potential inroads into the box or shots at goal. And we do it really a lot. Like Roman Yarmolenko was actually one of the worst guys for that. He'd always sort of like cut back onto his left and then sort of look up and try and float that sort of 50-yard diagonal beauty. And it's like, well, no, man, no, we're on the hop, so get down the line and get the ball in the box. So Burusauri has looked really good whenever he's been involved. I think Robin Ludd is looking a lot sharper. He's playing. I think he's playing week in, week out in Greece, and has been now for like a year. And he's sort of developed into that professional. You know what I mean? Like he just looks like he belongs in that kind of pitch. Juhani Ojala at the back, next to Paulus Arajuri, is also, for me, he looks now tons more confident. He's like, with the greatest of respect, 2 or 3 times the player that he was at Asiako. You know what I mean? He's really picked up from Sweden, and he's really, really like dominating the area. So yeah, there's loads of places where there's new faces, or there's guys who've been around who've made the next step in terms of experience.
It says a lot that in. Sorry.
No, go. You carry on, Rich.
I'm sorry. Since Oyala and Ariuri have formed something of a partnership, they've had to push Moisander out to the left in Uranen's absence, which says a lot, really. That I mean, I'm not Moisander's biggest fan, for example, but that he's still the captain, and you're playing a ball-playing centre back at left back, which it says a lot that Riva isn't necessarily swayed by I need to pick, in the way that Mixu and Baka to a point were trying to play players based on either
name,
reputation or whatever. Eremenko, Hämäläinen, and I say Hämäläinen's barely featured in the last few months. And more players are coming through because they're either playing well at club level or because they're giving something different. Soidi being the prime example, but since he's gone to America and is playing regularly, high profile, and he's playing under Vieira and until recently next to Pirlo, that's a massive opportunity for someone who, again, with all due respect, wasn't exposed to that level of experience and learning. We don't see what happened on the training ground.
Who that you're talking about there, Rich? Sorry, I don't think.
Alex Ring.
Alex Ring.
A Ring, yes. Okay.
Yeah, so he went to New York City and he was on the shortlist for the MLS Rookie of the Year. All the various stats accounts on Twitter have been raving about him as, in the way that sort of Tim Sparv was in Germany, where he's doing a lot off the ball. He's the interceptions, the reading of the game, the sort of things. And Sparv was known as the no stats all-star.
Yeah,
for quite some time because he was that sort of Moneyball style player.
Yeah,
and essentially, Finland's first choice midfield, if they're not injured and on form, and we saw against Iceland, I think it was when virtually all of them played together and played well. There's Sparv, Ring, Etamai was played out of his skin that day as well. Robin Lodd's come in, and again, the benefits, and he's earning I think he's being looked at by clubs in some slightly higher profile leagues than Greece. He shoots, and I think whether it's by chance or design, there's looking like he's falling into a system and a set of players who work well together. It's not just about Eremenko's playing brilliantly at club level, let's stick him in. He wasn't making that team play better. And I think, saying results have been excellent, and this Nations League, the draw for which I think is being made in January, that could be quite interesting. Semi-competitive games against similarly ranked nations.
I tell you what, Rich, I've got that as a subject for the next episode. So let's go into that in a little bit more detail.
Definitely.
I think that sounds good. One thing that I wanted to ask, maybe you, Mark, is you mentioned Hämäläinen not really featuring recently. There was the big transfer between two big clubs in Poland. How has that worked out?
So that was, I think, a year and a half ago when he went from
was it that long? Okay.
Was it from Poznan to Warsaw? And when he first went there, it was a bit of a. I mean, so it's maybe best to say that Hämäläinen in Poznan was like a second striker or a wing forward. So he always played up top, and they won, I think, 2 titles while he was there. And his contract was running out, and the board in Poznan didn't want to renew it, so Warsaw picked him up on a free when his contract expired, and he went and he helped. I think he played like something like 5 to 10 times again in that up top position for the end of that season, and Legia Warsaw won the league, so he got himself his 3rd title, I think. And now this season it's kicked off. He started to play more regularly, but he's playing way deeper. They're playing like a 4-4-2, 4-5-1, and he's playing like a kind of like a right mid, roughly speaking. So he's more sort of halfway line than edge of the box, holding the ball up. I think he's got 1 or 2 goals. But he's not. He's turning into like a bit of a different player. And I think that's probably what's caused him problems in terms of selection at the national team level. Is that he's not really a forward anymore. He's more of a sort of. and I mean he's getting older, so this is naturally what happens. He's sort of gravitating more towards a sort of right flank central midfield kind of berth. So he's doing all right, but he's not setting the world on fire.
Not among the goals as much as he was.
No,
I think there's a couple of other players that have sort of started to come into the national team in the last few games. You mentioned one of them before, which was Albin Granlund, right back. And also it occurred to me that Glenn Kamara seems to have made his way into the starting team. Certainly in the last couple of games, if I remember correctly. And it kind of seems to coincide with him, instead of being a young boy at Arsenal and going out on loan in the sort of League One, League Two, and not really playing. He started playing regularly for Dundee up in the Scottish Premiership, and
where they love him. They're raving about him in Dundee. I mean, they're it's kind of tricky because I think they're bottom of the league still in Scotland, but they love Glenn Kamara up there, which is good. Granlund, as he looked quite shaky earlier on. He was brought in as a quick fix when Kari Arkivor got injured, but I think he's played so well now in the last couple of games that for as far as I can tell, Arkivor was fit and ready for call up against the Estonia game. I mean, he's 34 now, so he's also kind of on the other side of the peak performance years. But I didn't even add him to the squad, and we just went with Granlund again because he's played well and he's earned himself on the back of the title in Marienham and the Huuhkajat performances. He's earned himself a move to Örebro, so that's a big step up for him, and I'm kind of hopeful that he'll make the best of it. If I remember rightly, though, in the Croatia game, Granlund started with the wrong boots on. I think he had the wrong grip. It was like no, he packed his own boots, but I think he was wearing blades, and the pitch was like it was covered in water, so it was it was almost not waterlogged, but it was too slippy, so he kept falling over, and I think he was against Rakitic or somebody like that on the left hand flank or his right hand flank, and so he kept slipping over, but then he switched boots at half time with Joona Toivio for like proper studs, and then he stepped up and saved the day.
Okay, anything else to add about Huuhkajat, or shall we wrap that up with a fairly efficient 45 minutes or so on the clock?
Let's bin this one.
Let's bin it.
Not bin it, Rich. Let's draw to a.
Put it in the can and get it ready to go.
Right. Okay. Let's do that then. So let's just remind everyone about our three sites. FC Suomi, with regular reports on the Huuhkajat players around the world and also upcoming games for the national team. I think the most recent thing there is a report on the game against Estonia from a week or so ago.
Yep.
Escape to Suomi. The most recent article, Rich, is
that was the what next for the Huuhkajat after the end of the World Cup qualifiers. So it was, I hopefully came across as a fairly balanced. It was just a bit of a rant, really, but it didn't. Looking at the green shoots, really, it was. The campaign was struggling from the off by nature of the poor seeding, and they got a pretty tough draw. And obviously, after Bacca's reign, it really put a kibosh on it. But yeah, the campaign ended on a positive note, and hopefully, in the next couple of years, with as we'll go into the Nations League and the Euro 2020, looking good.
On my Explore Finland podcast.com, there's been still just a few photo blogs recently, but I am actually working on new podcast episodes of Explore Finland radio show. It looks like it's shaping up to be a kind of maybe a Suomi Sata, a centenary celebration season, maybe 6 to 8 episodes, kind of themed around history and culture. So I guess, seeing as the Independence Day is the 6th of December, I need to get my finger out and start thinking about getting those all edited down and ready to go. But I think December, January, February should see some new podcasts coming there. So if you're interested, they'll be on their way. Remember, you can subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you search for Finnish Football Show on YouTube, you should follow us. And a few weeks after you hear this one, you'll hear the next episode of this podcast, where we look forward to next season, 2018, a bit about FIFA rankings and new upcoming Nations League, academy and reserve teams in Finland, candidates for the chairmanship of Palloliitto. So if that doesn't get you excited, I don't know what will. It'll be coming up. It's coming up soon. But until then, thanks for joining us on the Finnish Football Show, and bye, Mark. Bye, Rich.
Bye.
Bye.
Dope. never quick enough with the pause button. I don't quite know where all this other music's come to in my phone. But anyway, I can edit that out, and I will. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Finnish Football Show. I'm Mark Wiltshire from Explore Finland podcast. Again, I'm joined by Mark from FC Suomi. Hi, Mark.
Hello.
And Rich from Escape to Suomi. Hi, Rich.
Hello.
And Rich, you appear to be wearing the same shirt you were wearing for the previous episode, which is this hideously garish Ilves shirt from the 1990s.
Yeah, in the various weeks since we put the last episode out, my washing machine's been so busy doing baby clothes that I'm basically living in the same clothes. So my beard hasn't grown much, but you know.
That'll happen when you start to develop. This is Finnish Football Show 18. We're going to focus in this episode on looking forward towards next season. As ever, we want your input, so live viewers can use the message box on the right-hand side of the screen to ask questions. Podcast listeners use social media to get in touch. Our Twitter handles are at FC Suomi, at Escape to Suomi, and at Explore Finland. And you can also find the Finnish Football Show Facebook group. Ask to join, we'll let you in, and anyone on there can share whatever stories they want to regarding Finnish football. And if it's interesting, it normally starts a little bit of a chat going. So, Rich, I know you've got no biscuits. I'm sure you won't drop any F-bombs. But how about if we crack on and look at next season, this Nations League. I know that nobody still really understands the Nations League, and I've read about it and I've listened to podcasts about it, and I kind of get it. But I guess it's only once we get started that it will start to happen. But I think there's maybe you wanted to talk about the FIFA rankings, Mark, and I think maybe we can also roll into then the Nations League and how that might affect the rankings. But first of all, what's happened to Finland's ranking recently?
I think the latest we're on is now 74. So we're up now. How many places? That's something in the order, by the order of 40 places from where we were at the start of the year. Because I think our all-time low was, I think this March, it was about 110, something like that. So we're up, and the next set of rankings will have in them the 3-0 home win against Estonia, and Estonia was still relatively well placed when we played them, which means that we'll be jumping up again something about 3 or 4, potentially 5 places, which means we could be sort of finish the year 60 something, almost having kind of halved our standings in the world, so to speak. And what that meant was that when the groups or pots were locked down for this Nations League, we ended up in pot 3 I think by the skin of our teeth. Something like that. Because I think who was the cutoff point below us? It was.
I think there was two or three sides below, but it wasn't a huge chasm, was it?
No, No, and it was based on it wasn't based on your overall points. It was literally just like the next worst team from you. And I think we skipped above Lithuania. I think it was Lithuania, something like that, at just the right time.
So Finland are going to be in League C. And I'm going to read this actually, because I find that every time someone talks about this, a little bit more information sinks in. So I'm just reading this directly from the UEFA website. So League C includes Hungary, Romania, Scotland, Slovenia, Greece, Serbia, Albania, Norway, Montenegro, Israel, Bulgaria, Finland, Cyprus, Estonia, and Lithuania. Teams will be split into one group of 3 and 3 groups of 4. 4 group winners are promoted to League B, with the 4 sides that finish bottom relegated to League D for the 2020 edition. The top 4 ranked League C teams that do not qualify for UEFA Euro 2020 will enter playoffs in March 2020 with 1 finals place on offer. So, we've talked about this being a semi-competitive football, but there is kind of a point to it. If Finland performs well in this competition, I guess that will affect the FIFA rankings, because they're games where they will accrue coefficient points. They'll then potentially move up into the higher league, where they'll be playing against better teams, and that has a positive effect on the coefficient if they can start to win those games. And then there's this potential playoff place for the 2020 competition as well. I think, Mark, when this was first mooted, maybe earlier this season, you were worried that it meant Finland would be playing against weaker teams, and that would have a negative effect on the coefficient. But
so
maybe after a year of winning games or performing better, you feel differently about it.
So I mean, I'm not 100% decided on it yet. What it means. So one clever way for teams to get the best out of the FIFA ranking system is to choose their opponents cleverly, and because the amount of points you gain from a win is dependent on how good the team you beat are. Right? So a good example is Burkina Faso. So Burkina Faso are 50th in the FIFA rankings at the minute, 50, 51, something like that. And that's because they were in the they qualified for and did well in the group stage of the African Cup of Nations about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, something like that. So Burkina Faso aren't necessarily a particularly good team, because after they qualified and did the group stage, a lot of their players retired and they haven't won in like a year. But they still have a high place. That's a nice scrape. They still have a high place in the rankings. So we could potentially pick a friendly against them and do way better than we would. We get like twice as many points as we would from the win that we got against Estonia. The problem is that the teams that are higher up in the FIFA rankings tend to be better teams, like by and large. And so picking that kind of delicate course is not as easy. But a lot of the theorists behind Wales's 2016 Euros run and performance was that in about 4 or 5 years before it, they set up a friendly schedule to get them the most boost in the FIFA rankings, to put them into pot 3 of the qualification group, to give them weaker opponents to play in that actual specific qualification group.
I think, Mark, actually, it wasn't so much their friendly schedule picked the right teams. They just didn't play many friendlies. I heard this the other day, that the coefficient points for friendlies are like weighted like a quarter of the value of actual competitive games. So I think Switzerland as well have done something similar. They don't play many friendlies. Italy, on the other hand, have played a lot of meaningless friendlies, which meant that when it came to the qualifications for this World Cup, they weren't seeded. So they were in a pot with Spain, and that's what's led to them not qualifying for the World Cup.
Yeah. But I mean, Italy's a bit different, because at the higher end of the FIFA rankings, if you want to be first, second, third, or fourth, you need to win loads of games all the time. So in that sense, the points you get from friendly wins are contributive, because you're a big team that needs to just get that like extra 10 points against Germany or Brazil. That's where that was the crucial flaw in Italy's plan. so maybe the way to say is that it's less easy to game the system now, which I didn't think is a good thing. But on the other hand, it's probably not a bad thing, because we put ourselves against teams that we can almost certainly beat. You know what I mean? Like it's like teams like Estonia, you know what I mean, are now in our immediate vicinity for this League C. So if we play those kind of teams, I think Cyprus are in there as well.
Yeah.
Then we can relatively easily assume that we'll be in a place to compete. The other downside in addition to not gaming the system, is crowds. So I think there was about 2,000 people only for the Estonia. That was the official Tannoy number. It was 2,200, so it probably was less than that. I mean, the Estonia game had a problem because it was organised on the same night as a Finland-Russia hockey match, which, I mean,
nice.
I don't know who was in charge of running the fixtures for that. But I mean, come on, guys, come on, give us a chance. But I mean, particularly with the renovation of the stadium and all the rest of it, you do want to draw in an opponent like somebody like Germany or England or Italy that brings a crowd. You know, the Veritas Stadium for the Turkey game was an absolute sellout, and I mean there was a fair amount of Turks there. It has to be said, but Turkey are that kind of opponent where you can fill a stadium. You know what I mean? And if you're bringing Estonia or Belarus or Cyprus, you're probably not going to get the same crowds / same revenue / same exposure. So there's a financial hit to it as well.
But the I guess the flip side might be that because this is seen as meaningful and competitive, that people might be a little bit more interested, and there wouldn't be this feeling of, oh, it's just another friendly that, you know, it doesn't matter. But actually, I need to get behind my team and try and support them here. And I guess, for example, drawing against Scotland, and maybe seeing if a number of Scottish fans would travel. And then maybe in League B, there's both the Ireland teams as well as Wales, and maybe that brings some crowd over with it as well. Because it's not just a friendly; it has some kind of meaning. So hopefully, that will outbalance the fact that in the beginning these are going to be fairly or similar sized teams without such a huge following.
So it's likely we'll get into three. There's 3 groups of 4, 1 group of 3. So, I mean, if you look at the potential, like a dream group in terms of like, I don't know, competition,
being able to win,
competition, crowd, and you know all the rest of it is something along the lines of like Scotland, Estonia, maybe, and then somebody like, I mean, so there's a couple of, so in Group C, like Serbia, and I wouldn't want to play Serbia. Romania and Hungary are there, who knacked us in the last qualification rounds. But I mean, apart from that, I mean, if you could get somebody like Scotland, somebody like maybe Montenegro, you know, a nice sunny away trip, wouldn't go amiss. And then like somebody, we've got lots of neighbours here, so Lithuania are there, Estonia are there.
One thing that's often said is that about the smaller teams. The very small teams, you know, Gibraltar, San Marino, Andorra, maybe even Kosovo. Now they're there. About, you know, they're too small. They don't compete with the bigger teams. They should have their own pre-qualifying competition. And while so they get to play against each other and have competitive games. And this is kind of a move in that direction as well, isn't it? Like you get these teams there, and some of them might start. I mean, I think, is it Luxembourg that's actually been putting a few results together?
Andorra as well,
and Andorra have had a couple of results recently. So if they're in groups all with countries of similar quality at the moment, and they start to win some games, that might start to actually build them up, and then they progress and they play against bigger countries like Finland and Estonia, and you know. And so on. Maybe we'll start to see one of those smaller countries start to grow, like Turkey did from the 80s through the 90s.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you know, like I said, I'm still on the fence about it. I mean, it's it sort of standardizes everything, which is one of the things that I don't like, because I mean, like, one of the other parts about this is it means like, so because it's a nations league in Europe, and this is going to dominate the friendly schedule, we don't then get like Trinidad and Tobago or Canada, or and they were all really interesting games recently. Well, not recently, I suppose they were like 4 or 5 years ago, but it sort of localizes your competition base. But I mean, I think you're right though. It could make it more. It'll give us something else to play for.
Yeah, I'm interested. I'm interested to see it as a competition in its own right, and that potential wild card or playoff. What I guess wild card plays into a playoff. There's a chance there to do something, even if the regular qualifying doesn't quite go to plan.
Yeah.
Rich, you wanted to say something about academies and reserve team.
Yeah, basically after the last, or the season that's just gone, there were some good seasons for the academy/reserve teams of the Veikkausliiga clubs. Which is Huuhkajat's reserve team, they've been promoted to Ykkönen, second tier. These are basically, so Huuhkajat have a team in each division. They got promoted because they were in the third division.
You mean in Veikkausliiga and now in Ykkönen?
Yeah. So obviously Huuhkajat won Veikkausliiga. Klubi are now in the second division, or second tier, sorry.
Yeah.
After getting promoted from the Kakkonen. So again, it kind of raises, and again, coming from, we're all English. We're from a country that is very opposed to B teams and feeder teams and that, because of the culture of how. In the third division next year, you're also going to have Asiko's academy side, Honka's academy side, and Hifki's reserve team. They've all been promoted into the third division. Cups have their, while it's not officially Cups, they have a farm club agreement with Cups, so that Cups players, if they're coming back from injury, will feature for Kufu 98. Freddie Adu made a few appearances for them during his spell. And it's kind of indicative of the fact that, these clubs, these sides, because they're part of bigger clubs, they have a much bigger resource base, infrastructure, access to coaching. Some of them are very, very closely affiliated with the first teams, some not so much. They are now being promoted ahead, on the pitch on merit of other clubs who are dropping down the divisions. And it's, again, sort of trying to temper that with the English side of things, where it's very much a no-no. We've now got...
Can you just explain, because just for my benefit and for those listening, that we have Veikkausliiga, the top division, then there's one Ykkönen, second level, then there are three Kakkonen at the third level. How does the promotion and relegation work there?
Well, from Kakkonen, you've got, I think last year they changed it to 3 groups of 10.
Yeah.
So they play off, but because they're only going for 2 places in Ykkönen, so the 3 group winners and then the best runner-up will have a 2-legged playoff. The way they did it this year, normally it was just, I think last year it was the team with the highest points, which was quite straightforward. This year it was a very convoluted system of goal difference and goal average and this, that and the other, which basically allowed Klubi into the 4th place, even though they didn't have the highest points. 4 teams. So Klubi, who didn't win their division, still got promoted ahead of 2 clubs that did.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Kakkonen is a national. Yeah, so they beat Viking it, didn't they?
Yeah, Viking it. Yeah, it was. They smashed them at home, I think, and then struggled away. But yeah.
So that's that's still run by Palolito. So while the groups are supposedly regional, the geographical makeup of the teams makes it slightly weird, because next season in the northern group you've still got 2 teams from Tampere. So Tampere United and TPV are going to have to travel Lapland, have to make, I think, and then some of the distances they've got to cover just for league games are obscene. But the way they work it out is just, I think, throw a pin in it and see where it lands. And then you've got leagues administered by the regional FA, so they'll have the team. So Mupa, in their current form, are now going to be playing in Kakkonen next year because they won the 4th tier, which is a regional division. They took the place, and this is also a strange thing about when clubs go bust. They often take the place of their junior side. So in Mupa's case, when they went bust in, was it 2014?
Yeah.
They're seniors, and they basically took over their junior club, get 5th tier. VPS have basically turned their junior side, who are competing at lower level, into a reserve team, so they'll be playing in the 4th division.
I think Honka did the same, didn't they? When Honka went bust, to get out of the debt around the stadium and the rest of it, they made a company that managed the junior side, and then just filtered all the players that were out of contract back into that.
Yeah. It's with the risk of being controversial to some of our Scottish listeners, it's very much how Rangers sort of reformed, but still had a place in the professional setup. So you're going to have a lot of teams certainly in the 3rd division next year who are junior clubs. It's maybe again in England it's not the done thing at all. But
they won't be, if Clubby wins Huuhkajat next year, they won't get promoted into Veikkausliiga, will they? I presume they'll be kept one division down.
Probably.
Oh, you don't.
No,
I'm not sure.
No, I don't, because in and again this is really weird, but in one of the Keski-Pohjanmaa lower divisions, I think it was teams from Uliveska, their 1st and 2nd teams competed in the same division. They both won that division. So the 1st team won, the 2nd team came 2nd in that division, and they both got promoted again into the next division up.
Yeah. And
so
earlier this year, didn't Essigo and Essigo's Academy play in the cup?
Yeah, they did. That's true. Yeah.
What's the difference? So in a way, the precedent's already been set for teams to compete on the same playing field for the same trophy, even though they're the same damn club. It's crazy.
Yeah.
And I mean, so the local team here is Futura, who were relegated from Kakkonen last season and played Kolmonen this season, and we're at the top and then didn't go back. But we've played in front of between 500 and 1,000 guys, or attendances vary. Globy 04 before, and it's I mean, you can see it, 10 years ago it didn't make that much of a difference. Globy 04 were just another group of lads. They were all obviously younger than the kind of semi-pros that we've got around here, but now when they turn up, they rock up on a team bus, and there's 2 physios, and there's 2 coaches, and there's a guy who takes care of the drinks and the refreshments and the coffee, and they've got the whole entourage of a pro club. And it's a bit, I mean, it's kind of difficult to sort of to put yourself in that place, because when you're the guy who's let's say you're 30s or whatever, you've got some experience, or you're trying to learn the game or whatever, you just look across the pitch, and they're from a totally different planet. And it's really I can't understate the kind of the impact, particularly over a league season, of that kind of infrastructure that sits behind a team. You could take any of the Kakkonen or Kolmonen teams now, and if you put a standard team bus behind them, a training regiment, a nutritionist, a physiotherapist, cool boxes and the rest of it behind those guys, their performances would go up I don't know, they wouldn't become magic players, but they'd be better prepared, less injured, less tired, more focused, all the rest of it.
Is there automatic promotion from these regional, the sort of 4th tier regional divisions into Kakkonen? Because I noticed that there's kind of 3 Kakkonen divisions, and each one has 3 relegation spots. So is it automatic from below?
It's not automatic. Generally, if a club wins that division, there'll be apply. And again, it's based on licensing, what structure that club has, but they'll be invited to apply. But it's not a right as such.
Okay.
And
sorry.
all I was going to say is fundamentally is that this is where the kind of beeries come in and earn their bread, so to speak. So reworking or rewiring the lower echelons of the league when teams go bust or teams change or the numbers are different or the registrations are different. The Paloliitto basically says, okay, I need a structure down to here, and they manage, I think, down to about like Kakkonen and Kolmonen level, and then Kolmonen and down, the beeries then just put teams in baskets, basically. I think probably, if I know the guys well enough, it's probably manually in Excel sheets. but yeah,
like regional associations you're talking about, Mark.
Yes. The regional associations. Piirit is the Finnish version of that.
But on the other side of that coin, Lahti's academy side finished bottom of their Kakkonen group and have dissolved. They've given their infrastructure to Kuusasi, who are one of the clubs who basically they merged to form Lahti, and they've decided that it's their academy players or their junior side will get more benefit from going on loan. So they're going to put a greater emphasis on their players playing, a whole season for another side, playing within that setup rather than a slightly sanitized version of having an academy side. I'm sure there's a cost element in that as well, but it does cost to run a second team and with that structure. But everyone else seems to be making inroads into promoting their academy side, and Lahti have decided we'll go the other way and use loan system instead.
It's a really tricky system though, because one of the problems with the academy sides is that they take a lot of kids so it's the academy model. So they take thousands and thousands of kids and run the numbers basically until they get the kind of 20 to 30 that are the fittest, most technical, best guys that have their fit, and then they deploy them into lower leagues, and that's where you get kind of this inherent problem or choice, because if you put an academy side into a man's league, they will learn through playing, but they will be targeted predominantly for physicality and inexperience. So the way to beat a young, technically gifted team is to be stronger than they are and to be more organized than they are. So they don't learn that much above what they're currently technically capable of doing. The problem with the other way though is the other choices like Lahti are doing is sending kids on loan is you can learn a more adaptive game against, for example, you'd play in Ykkönen and be spread out across the Ykkönen and Kakkonen tiers. But because you're on loan, you don't really have that kind of that sort of learning threat, because you know that whatever happens at the end of your loan period, you go back to Lahti on your contract, and then if it didn't go well, or if you didn't like it, or if you didn't adjust, it doesn't really matter, because you'll have another shot at it next season. So it's a bit there's no I'm not the guy who has a perfect answer for football development, but I can see kind of problems with both of the systems, because the academy approach is really consolidating gifted players so that they don't have proper opponents.
If you don't have answers for all of football's problems, Mark, in future, maybe the new chairman of Paloliitto.
Oh, nice.
Oh my word! That is a segue.
That is smooth.
I'm proud of you. That's amazing. That's amazing.
All right, I'll take that. It came from your words. You set them up, and I'll just knock them down. But obviously, we talked previously about Pertti Ajala passing away earlier this year, and there were 4 people up for the chairmanship, and now that's been cut down to 2. Maybe. Any information on those? Obviously, one of them is Ville Niinisto, who's a politician here in Finland for the Green Party. What are your thoughts?
And he played lower league football when he was in his younger days. So he's got some experience of the game, although he hasn't done anything administratively or with clubs. He does. I think he's I'm going to say nephew of Sauli Niinisto.
He is,
yes. Yeah.
So who was the Paloliitto chairman back in 2006 before he became
I didn't know
president. So by family, he's got some input and he's got some good experience. He's also well fluent in the kind of ways and means of government, and roughly speaking, that's the best way to solve problems, because if the Palaliiton chairman can argue for and get additional funding and budget and additional resources to kind of raise awareness and promote programs, football will develop at a far faster rate because there's more, there's more money to play with. So he's from the kind of political end of the sphere. He's like, personality-wise, there's a lot of political commentary that says that he would be prime minister already if he wasn't with the Green Party. So if he'd have had like a social democrat backing or conservative leanings, then he's exactly the kind of guy that would lead a party to running a government, because he's smart, charming, adaptive. He's got his principles and his ethics, but he's not like averse to making deals. The other guy is Ari Lahti?
Yes.
The Coops boss.
Coops owner.
The Coops Uber boss, whose background is business, fundamentally. So he's I don't know if he's a millionaire. I think he is a millionaire, but I'm not...
yeah, he's got a lot of interest in Kuopio. He's part of his latest plan for Coops is regenerating huge swathes of Kuopio and building a new Coops stadium within this complex.
Mm.
I think Coops are massively in debt to him, so it's he's basically bankrolled them for a number of years now.
Do we think this combination of business and politics could be a good team somehow to get both of them involved? Can't both be chairman, obviously, but
yeah. And so Ari was up for, I think he was up for election when Niinisto was up for election, and he ran, I think, against Pertti Alaja initially, but he didn't get any sway, because at the time Alaja was so nobody could have beaten Sauli Niinisto. He's just one of those guys. Pertti Alaja was like a guy's guy inside football, and so he had the kind of support forever and ever. And I think Ari Lahti was really vocal loads of times, particularly around like sticking with Mixu and around the hiring of Bakke and around roughly how the Palaliiton itself is organized around these relatively informal relationships that are subject to personal preferences. So, or the old boys club kind of mentality. He sees it's not good for business, it's not good for organizational development, that kind of stuff. I think they were both interviewed on MTV last week, and Ari Lahti said that he's campaigning on like more power to the Piirit, which is giving kind of devolving central power from the Palaliiton. And then Ville Niinisto said something along the lines of he's the candidate for total change, and he would bring in like a review to how the Palaliiton is set up, and then try and basically shorten the time from the office to the pitch, so that they could have more influence. So I think in a sense it's a choice between like having one centralized kind of body that can try and make big large scale improvements against giving the regions more autonomy and power to develop. I think the Piirit have had a fair amount of crack at fixing Finnish football. So
did either of them have anything to say about the Women's Cup for next year, Mark?
I don't believe they poached it as a key issue, I'm afraid.
But you said you mentioned before that this is not that there isn't a Women's Cup next year.
Not for next season, no. Well, how they're going this time is they are changing the women's Suomen Cup to match the men's format, which has worked
because it's been so successful.
So basically what they're going to do is they're not going to have a 2018 Cup final. They're going to start the 2018-19 competition next autumn around the same time as the men's. So they're not going to have a cup next year, which is, again, I've gone on about cups and stuff, and it's open cup competitions are supposedly the big smaller clubs to have their shot at the big time, have their Rocky Balboa moment, if you will, to to play the big side. And again, the cup culture is different. But when you look at the number of participants in the men's competition, it's dropped by 75% in the last 10 years. And the Women's Cup, women's football is progressing in Finland. It's still, again, it's not perhaps on the scale of the men's, but then it isn't really in many countries. When you're looking at one of Finland's most experienced women players are looking at becoming vice president of Paloliitto. So Katri Mattsson, she had 100 caps for Finland, retired a couple of years ago. But then you've got Marco Casagrande a couple of weeks ago, who's the Secretary General of Paloliitto, basically saying that women shouldn't be remunerated for playing for the national team in the same way that men do. Obviously, this is because this has come out of several protests. Really, in the Nordic countries have been the forerunners, but also in the US and abroad, where while the national team players of the men's and the women's team get the same expenses, they get the same bonuses, they get the same participation, they get the same treatment for doing the same job. And obviously, that doesn't necessarily translate to bonuses, where team did qualify for, say, Euro 2020, they'd get huge financial settlements from UEFA as a reward. But when women's Finland team have qualified for UEFA tournaments, and so on paper they've been more successful than the men.
Yeah.
Now, I suppose from a neutral point of view, and the argument from Denmark, who forced the game to be postponed recently, Norway, who have now agreed that all the match bonuses will be the same. The bonuses will be different depending on the share of, for qualifying, but the general flat rate will be the same. Casagrande has basically said, well, men's game is more high profile, so they get more money. They get more professional sort of support, they get the infrastructure, they get better flights, hotels, and so on. That's, I know money doesn't grow on trees and so on. He has sights of budgets, but if you're going to try and get this, make Finland's, certainly Paloliitto, look like an equal opportunities employer, as a forward-thinking organisation that makes women, girls want to play football and also be treated as equals and everything, it's not that difficult to say, right, you get the same amount for turning up, you get the same remuneration for missing. And a lot of these players aren't professionals either. They have to take time off work. They have to juggle their personal lives around. And after this, even Tim Sparv, who's the sort of vice captain of Finland, has said we need to have this conversation.
Yeah.
He didn't come out and say straight away things need to be equal, but there needs to be more of a conversation about this, because the women's team traditionally doing fairly well. They've won their opening World Cup qualification game. They've got another one next week. They've got a new coach who's a professional women's football coach. She's done well in Sweden, Scotland, so on. But there's a lot to be said about that feeling of, and again, it's something we'll come on to shortly about identity, where the Irish team last year complained that they had to pay to wear Ireland FA tracksuits. Little things like that, where you're basically being run like a Sunday league team.
Yeah.
Rich, go on. Let's go on to identity. I don't know if much has happened, or since we talked about it, 6 months ago. Again, maybe with these upcoming elections, that once that's all sorted, we may see this picked up again. Is there anything else to say about identity? The identity project?
So
there's very little. You go, Mark.
No, you go.
You both got very little to say.
Well, it's something that, again, in the year or so ago when it came up, it was the big thing about having a DNA and making everything feel like it's part of a big family. And go back to England, we've seen at a youth junior level how having that sort of corporate approach to everything, having the young players playing at a professional setup in St George's Park, having coaches to a certain level, of making everyone feel involved on the pitch, that's had massive rewards already. In Finland, there's still, you know, a lot of lip service has been paid to having the junior sides, you know, run professionally in the way that we talked about some of the young junior clubs in the low divisions. But it just seems to have got lost. There's a lot of hype around the upcoming Euro under-19 tournament, but when they had their little pre-run for that, and we talked about identity, they got absolutely thumped. And their last 7 games, they've lost by an aggregate of 25-1. And you think where an identity should be a corporate approach to every team within the Palolito umbrella, where it's the men's A team, the women's A team, all the way down to I don't know, under 15s. But you've got whole different approaches. You've got, like we talked about in the last episode, when Finland lost, was it 9-0 to Holland?
Yeah.
In the warm-up tournament, the coach didn't make an appearance and sent out to the juniors. Yeah. And you've got 17, 18-year-old boys going out facing, well, for that tournament anyway, basically in tears because the coach didn't have that accountability. And again, it might boil down to the old boys network or whatever, but
one of those guys, as we mentioned 2 weeks ago in the podcast, was of dual nationality. You know what I mean? So you send out one kid, you know, who's got an affiliation to your country and another country to take the flak for a drubbing, you know, and he's got another country as an option on his table, and you think, well,
this is Sergei Eremenko you're talking about.
Yeah, it's Sergei Eremenko, which is that. I mean, so I could quite easily see, even without a 9-0 drubbing, you could see somebody like Sergei Eremenko, because of the difficulties his family have had and the experiences they've had of, you know, going to play for Russia or choosing to play for Russia, sending him out for the cameras after a 9-0 defeat, you know, and as well, Sergei Eremenko is an attacking midfielder. So if you lose 9-0, however it happens, generally it's not that guy's fault. I mean, maybe he could talk about tracking back and the rest of it, but putting him out in front of the cameras is only going to make him see the same thing that he's going to hear from his elder brother and his you know, his dad, which is that these guys don't have your back when you need it. And you know, with the Helmarit we just talked about, it's exactly linked to this, is that if we do have an identity, it's an identity, right? So it's all of us. You know what I mean? Which means we back everybody to the same kind of like standard. So one interesting thing is, I was trying as hard as I could to find anything about this. So I know really little. I know that Mika Aaltonen, who was the Finnish player, national team player in the 80s, he smacked the goal for, I think, TPS against AC Milan. Inter Milan. Thank you. That belter of a strike. He's now the head of research at the Palolito. So I think this might fall under the identity project. Might fall under that kind of research bracket as part of player development, which is under, I think, Hannu Tihinen. But I haven't seen anything formal, except for Huuhkajat brought out an identity kit earlier in the summer, which was like it was a guidebook for parents and young coaches, and a DVD set about kind of what are the composite parts of becoming a professional footballer, and if you've got kids, what are the things you should focus on. And it was like quick feet, speed, athleticism, muscle durability, and awareness, this kind of thing. And so that was and they called it like the Huuhkajat identity package. Them and AC Oulu had some also. It was the Oulu identity, which was more about playing style, that they'd started to talk about through marketing stuff. But I think it was more about like Oulu style, kind of like almost social media / marketing kind of campaign.
It's like a values sort of campaign, isn't it? Where it's about feeling that belonging and feeling, you know, if you want to play for Huuhkajat, I remember seeing a bit of that one, where it was about having that pride representing Huuhkajat.
Yeah.
You know, so it was more than just technicals.
Which means that there are existing identity projects ongoing in some clubs, but they don't seem to be at all affiliated with the kind of the Palolito and the overarching identity project. So
we've had a question, and maybe this is the final thing we should do before we wrap up this show, because we've been going here now for about 40 minutes. Samp on the live chat asks, is Liga Cup returning next season, or is it again that Suomen Cup group stage thing? which
Yes,
almost could go in Tournament Cup group stage thing, like that, Sam.
Liga Cup is dead.
Yeah, which is a
Until
shame.
it comes back.
I mean, Liga Cup was a great experience, particularly as a fan. Mid-afternoon games inside, you know, couple of beers, bit of chanting, close environment. It was a really, I really liked the Liga Cup.
Yeah, it was kind of fun, different experience, wasn't it?
Yeah, the pressure was off pre-season. It was really like, hey,
Sam, Lumi's come to give her, which is
Hang on.
probably as much use as any of our opinions at most times.
Switch into a back four. Hello.
Hey, Lumi, come on, say something to us.
Hello.
Looking at her dad like, what is this lunacy? What are you trying to get me involved in? And
she's more finished than any of us.
Yeah, that's true. and she's showing that by not having very much to say for herself in a social situation.
Yeah.
Well, Lumi, if that's your attitude, I think that's about time to wrap up this episode of the show. If you want to see what Lumi looks like, YouTube video, which will be published at the same time as this, or if you go onto YouTube, you'll find it. Search for Finnish Football Show, and you can also subscribe to the YouTube channel there. Remember, you can keep up to date with what we're doing outside of the podcast. Mark, epsisodes.com for regular reports on Finnish national players and playing overseas. Rich, escapetosuomi.com. Sorry. And Rich with escapetosuomi.com, regular articles about Finnish football in general tend to be a bit more in-depth and featuring some guest writers from time to time. And then my explorefinlandpodcast.com, new podcast episodes coming very, very soon. Mark, Rich, thanks for joining me again.
Thank you.
And thank you.
So those of you listening, thanks for joining us again, and we'll see you next time on the Finnish Football Show. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah.